City of Maple Planning Commission to order on Tuesday, March 19th. Roll call.
Lou Yang,
Present.
present.
Tushar Desai, present.
Fred Dom, present.
Paul Arbuckle, present.
Bill Kempe here.
Alan Egan, present.
Is John's the only one missing then tonight, huh?
Correct.
Mr. Chair, I understand that Commissioner Ides will not be joining us.
Okay. He is the one absent. Approval of the agenda. Any corrections or additions? Staff?
None. Move to approve it as presented.
And a motion by Bashar, second by Fred. All those in favor?
Aye.
Ayes, passed.
I have something else.
Approval of the minutes, January 15th. Any corrections or additions? Catch anything?
Move for approval.
There's been a motion by Bill,
Second?
second by Alan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passed. Number 5, public hearing, 7 or later, wetland buffer variance resolution for an addition to a single-family home at 1603 Mary Street North. Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Tonight we'll be hearing a variance request by Ann Rivard. Ann lives at 1603 Mary Street. And for your information, I have a few overheads to go through the presentation here, so if I could get the overheads. Thank you. So as you can see on the map here, Ms. Rivard lives on Mary Street, and there is a managed bee wetland located in the backyard of her property. City code does require that the buffer of 75 feet be maintained adjacent a managed bee wetland. The addition that Ms. Rivard is proposing will require a 43-foot wetland buffer variance. It should be noted that the applicant's home at 1603 Mary Street was constructed in 1988, and the existing home is located 50 feet, from the wetland, so it's a pre-existing non-conforming home already constructed too close to the wetland than our current code allows. That backyard does consist of all mowed grass with a 20-foot wide rock bed adjacent the wetland. So the city's wetland ordinance, as I stated, requires a 75-foot buffer. That buffer could be reduced to 50 feet in some areas if the overall buffer maintains an average of 75 feet. However, that's not the case here. There's no room to do averaging. But within that buffer, no mowing, cutting, grading, or building is allowed. So I wanted to show you her proposal here. Here's the footprint of the house, and you can see Ms. Rivard is proposing the four-season porch on the back side of the property, or on the west side. So this porch will be 18 feet deep by 14 feet wide, total of 252 square feet in area. And the addition will encroach further into the backyard and will be located within 32 feet of the wetland. So that addition, therefore, will require a 43-foot wetland buffer variance. And Ms. Rivard did submit some examples of what that addition would look like. Kind of the architectural style, it will be a four-season porch, so clearly there will be walls and windows, but just kind of an example of the style of that proposed addition. I did want to note that the city's wetland ordinance, when we wrote this several years ago, knowing that in Maplewood there are plenty of pre-existing homes that are located closer to the wetland than the current ordinance allows. So we wrote in some exemptions to allow pre-existing homes to build on to their home if they're already too close. And that exemption would allow this home to build on as long as it's not closer to the wetland. And you can see on this footprint that there is the feasibility of building onto the backside of the garage there without getting closer to the wetland. However, because of the footprint of the house and what she was trying to accomplish. It just wasn't feasible to build onto that location. So she did pursue the wetland buffer variance here with the Planning Commission. So the Environmental and Natural Resources Commission did review the variance, and they looked at the mitigation strategies that are being proposed. Our wetland ordinance does state that the city may require an applicant to mitigate impacts to the wetland when approving a variance. And in this case, the mitigation strategies being proposed are a 252 square foot buffer that will be constructed within the current rock bed. And I apologize, Ms. Rivard had actually submitted a wetland buffer planting plan, a draft plan, and it's in your packet, but I failed to put it on the overheads here. But you'll see in that plan that she has hired a wetland specialist to do a planting plan, which does reflect this required wetland buffer, which would be located within the rock bed. So with that, the Environmental and Natural Resources Commission in January reviewed that and determined that that mitigation in creating a buffer where there actually isn't one currently, and allowing that water, that's extra water that's coming off of the addition, to flow down into that native plantings prior to it entering the wetland, was a good mitigation strategy, and they had recommended approval of that. So with that, this is a public hearing, and we do have some people in the audience who may want to speak. I did receive a couple of comments that you'll see in your staff report after surveying the 37 surrounding property owners that are within 500 feet. There were no strong opposition that we had received. So with that, city staff is recommending approval of the wetland buffer variance, and that is outlined in the resolution on attachment 1 of your staff report, and that allows for a 43-foot wetland buffer variance for a four-season porch addition at 1603 Mary Street. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Now, the calculation that you've come up with for the buffer is the square footage of the structure that's being built, right? The 252 square feet, is that how that comes into play?
Correct. City staff looked at a couple alternatives on how the impacts could be mitigated. We looked at the feasibility of adding a rain garden, perhaps, to capture the rain prior to it entering the yard itself, and then also looked at the buffer mitigation, and we felt that because it is a all mowed lawn currently, and all that water is currently just draining down into that rock bed and into the wetland, that it would be best to require that native plantings, and we came up with 252 square feet because of the size of the addition.
Now, that doesn't include the landing or the steps, which is an additional square footage, and the overhang of the roof. So that's still enough to cover, you think, the drainage of that area?
That is correct. It does not account for those. However, the stairs itself, maybe those are more porous.
Now, are they going to have to stop cutting the grass, or that's still going to stay the same because we're just allowing that because it's already done that way, or?
Our current ordinance allows these pre-existing non-conforming lawn areas to be maintained as lawn area and to be utilized the same way anyone would utilize their backyard. However, if it was a home where they had naturalized or native plantings, that already created a buffer, our ordinance prohibits, the cutting or mowing down of that. So in this case, correct, she can continue to maintain the lawn area, but she has proposed to do the plantings within that rock bed that is adjacent the wetland.
And will they put up signs now, too, about the buffer, or is that's not important?
Mr. Chair, we were not requiring the wetland buffer signage, but that's always something that you could look at as a mitigation strategy so that future homeowners perhaps know that, these native plants are here for a reason and you shouldn't be mowing them down.
Sean,
Go ahead, Bill.
could you Just briefly tell us what a managed B wetland is. You know, we've seen them, but, you know, what's the definition?
Because there's A, B, and C, right?
Yep. Well, that would kind of lead that I'd like to also know A and C, but B is the important one right now.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Kempe, so the classifications are determined by the Minnesota Routine Assessment Method, which any wetland specialist could go out and do this assessment to determine the classification. And manage A being the highest classification, the best quality wetland, the one that has not been as impacted as a managed C. So when we created the wetland ordinance, at the time, the Environmental Commission in particular did some real thorough scientific analysis of wetlands and how to protect them. And it was determined that at a minimum, all wetlands, regardless of their classification, should have at least a 50-foot buffer for water quality purposes. But any buffer after the 50 feet assists with wildlife habitat. So therefore, requiring those additional buffers for the higher quality wetlands. So the managed B is, you know, the middle class, okay condition. There are some impacts because, of course, there are residential homes on the east side of the wetlands, undeveloped on the west side.
That doesn't include lakes. Lake is a different category. That's not even in the wetland, right?
Correct. Lakes are identified by the DNR as public waters, and they identify those as different classes as well, like recreational versus whatever. So yes. And then we do have a shoreland ordinance, which requires certain just setbacks, no buffers currently in our shoreland ordinance. So setbacks to structures and so forth.
Okay. Guys have any questions? Did the homeowner want to come up for a moment then?
Yes, and Ms. Rivard is here, so if you care to. Ann, thank you.
Hello.
Hi. Now, I noticed on your drawing here that it said that you were going to have patio too. Is that true that you're adding the patio to it additional to the?
No, well, if I do anything, it would be on the lower level, because this is kind of where this addition is, it's off the kitchen, but there's also the family room, and there's a patio door that goes out just to the lawn in the back. If I did anything, it would just be like a slab of cement or something of that nature.
Underneath the
Yeah.
upper part?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And does it have much of an overhang?
Right now, the house has just your standard.
No, on the addition on
The addition, I'm looking to have like a 3 to 4 foot overhang that would cover, or that would go over this staircase
Okay.
and stuff going down, because that'll be running alongside the house, or alongside the addition, back towards the house.
Right, which was 3'8". I seen your
Yeah.
3'6". Yep.
Yeah,
So that would increase the area then of non-pervious too. Is that doesn't, Shauna, that doesn't create any more issues, right, when they can enlarge the roof surface? That's,
You know, the mitigation requirements it's not a science by any means. City staff tried to determine what is fair, you know, to an existing property owner, residential home. And you are correct, we did not take into account the overhangs, but that's certainly something, I'm not sure it would add that much square footage.
Okay.
But certainly something you could look at if you were concerned about the mitigation.
no, I just want to make sure that we're not overlooking certain areas that.
Sure.
That could, needed to be included.
Good points.
So, did anybody else have any questions for her?
Just have a comment.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I like that you've got a landscaping plan. And also like it that you're using indigenous plants. So I'm inclined to support this.
okay, thank you. Yeah, one thing that I had mentioned the last time was that I wanted to get a specialist that would work with me, hopefully, and I don't know if there's that many plants out there that are native, that are deer resistant, because there's a fair amount of deer in the neighborhood that do havoc on just about everything.
Okay.
So-
Are you doing the planting yourself or hiring it out?
I'm getting estimate both ways if I do it myself, but I'm getting, making sure that they're Minnesota native plants.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you buying those yourself or?
No,
is
I'm
your-
going through this
The planner's gonna do it?
designer, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Just going to say, there's a really good source for plants in Maplewood.
Oh, is there?
Yep.
Okay.
So, well, I'll tell you about it anyway, in case you
Yeah.
decide to go even
Yeah,
bigger.
yeah.
You know, at the Ramsey County Workhouse down on, I think, Lower Afton Road,
Oh,
they have a greenhouse program,
okay,
and they have lots of indigenous plants, and those people, if you go there, they know a lot. Tell
Okay.
them that you want indigenous plants, describe the
Yeah.
land, and they'll come up with a list of things.
cool. Thank you for that.
Alan?
Did you say you're going to be doing the planting yourself?
I don't know. I'm getting it estimated both ways to see. I've asked, because I'm looking at putting it in the existing rock area, bed area, and the rocks are about like this size. And I'm thinking maybe I can do that, move the rocks, get the rocks out of there, and maybe have him come in and knows how to dig and plant and all that, do that part of it. So I'm getting a couple different estimates.
Oh, you're getting a couple of estimates, right? Which means that you're not going to do it yourself. Is that what it is?
No, probably not.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm
because
going to get
it's-
somebody that knows what they're doing.
Yeah, really good. Okay, thank you.
You had said that it didn't work on the side of the garage, it's just because of the layout, the access into that new structure wouldn't just work, and for the sunlight and everything, just wouldn't work on the side of the house.
Right, because the side of the house where there would be room is the back of the garage. And the kitchen has the patio that overlooks the pond, and that's where I want to do it. I wanted to do it off of either the kitchen or the lower level. And because of the elevation, a little bit of elevation that I had, it made more sense to do it off the kitchen. Yeah.
Anything down that end? Yep. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Is there anyone else? Last and final call, is there anyone else that would like to speak? Seeing none, close the public hearing. We need a recommendation.
Sure.
Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, I move that we approve the attached resolution on this document, everything that's in it. I move that we approve all of that for the address of 1603 Mary Street North.
There's been a motion by Bill. Is there a second? Second by Fred. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? No nays? Hearing all ayes, pass. This is just a recommendation by us. This will go before the city council on
March 25th.
March 25th. Okay, thank you. Number B, wetland buffer variance resolution, lot division and reduction of front yard setback authorization for a single-family home on 2657 Geranium Avenue East. Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So our second wetland buffer variance for the evening, we have a theme going here. This proposal is by Ben Thone, who is a builder, and Ben had purchased this lot, which you see on the overhead here, at 2657 Geranium Avenue last year in hopes of subdividing it into 3 lots, 1 parcel for the existing home and 2 parcels for 2 new homes. The subdivision of a lot into 3 parcels requires administrative review and approval by city staff if all the lots meet city code, which in this case they did. So Ben, at the time, had submitted the lot split application to the city staff. However, during their survey work for the property, it was discovered that there is a wetland located on the northeast corner of the lot. Now, this wetland wasn't identified in any of the city watershed district or national wetland maps, so even when Ben had called the city to check on, the feasibility of developing this, he was not aware of this wetland. But the applicant, as required by law, had the wetland delineated prior to development, and Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District approved that delineation and did classify the wetland as a managed sea wetland. So they did that Minnesota routine assessment method out there and classified that as a managed sea, which is a degraded wetland. So then when city staff and Mr. Thone discovered that, we worked together on the development plan that would have minimal impacts on the newly discovered wetland. Here's an aerial photo that was submitted by Mr. Thone, kind of gives you an idea of the existing conditions out there. That's an older house located on that large lot. And, it's not a wetland, but clearly was determined to be a wetland. So, worked with the developer to come up with a plan, and there's a lot of lines on here, but you can see it better in your packet and the plans that were submitted to you. What we came up with was a plan that made parcel C, the lot that's most impacted by the wetland, to be a really wide lot, and the other lots being the minimum requirement, which is 75 feet. So this reduced the impacts to that wetland and only requires now a wetland buffer variance for parcel C, that lot that's located furthest to the east. The 2 new single-family homes on this lot, on the 2 lots, must be constructed with a front yard setback that is in line with the existing homes on each side. That's a requirement when there's pre-existing homes on each side. It's either 30 to 35 feet, or if there's homes on each side, it has to line up with the furthest one, or the closest one to the street, or the furthest one back. And in this case, it's 41 feet to the front property line. But again, to reduce the impact of that wetland, we, city staff, have looked at this and determined that they can pull that house closer to the front yard, and the city staff can approve this and what we call a reduced front yard setback authorization, which is done administratively, and it can be done if it meets 4 standards. One of the standards is, does that increased or reduced front yard setback, is it needed to preserve a natural feature? And in this case, is certainly the case, to help preserve the wetland. So the one house on parcel C will be located 21 feet to the front property line. I just wanted to point that out, and that's nothing that your commission has to make a determination on. It's just something that we can do administratively. But you can see how the applicant really worked with city staff to reduce those impacts to the wetland. So here's a couple examples of the proposed houses on these 2 new single-family lots. And again, in this case, the city can require wetland buffer mitigation when approving a wetland buffer variance. And we outlined the proposed mitigation in your staff report here, which is to install wetland buffer signs and then restore 1,622 square feet of wetland buffer on parcel C. And this calculation came from the amount of area that they'll be grading within the buffer. So we determined, you can see that hashed area on parcel C, that's the area of grading. So we just determined that since that's the impact on this lot, we would require that amount of square footage for wetland buffer planting on that lot as well. And then also, of course, a tree preservation plan, which is required whether there's a wetland buffer variance or not. They'll be required to submit a plan which shows all the significant trees, which I think is already on this current survey, and then show the trees that will be removed, and the code would determine if there's any replacement trees required. So again, our Environmental and Natural Resources Commission reviewed this variance in January, and they looked at the wetland buffer mitigation and determined that it was adequate. I think they added one more requirement, that an additional wetland buffer signs also be included for parcel B, which, of course, there's no variance there, but they do have the buffer, so we want to ensure that the new applicants, even though it's currently a mode buffer, that they don't, that they establish that as a naturalized area. So with that, this is a public hearing, and we did notify 44 property owners within 500 feet of this property of the public hearing. I did receive 2 responses that you see in your staff report. Just some concerns, not just, but concerns about impacts on drainage of water. And we did speak to this property owner and kind of outlined how the development would improve on some of that drainage. And then another property owner who had some questions, which I understand that Mr. Thone has actually talked to her and answered some of her questions. But I do see some of the neighbors here tonight who may want to speak. So with that, city staff is recommending approval of the variance for a new single-family home on parcel C of 2657 Geranium Avenue. And that variance will allow grading for the new home to come within 30 feet of the managed sea wetland, which requires a 20-foot wetland buffer variance. And that's outlined in the resolution on attachment 1 of your staff report. So with that, I'd be happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Go ahead, Bill.
How did we come to realize that there is a wetland at that location? You said that the state had no record of it, DNR had no record.
The survey crew had determined the soils, the moisture there, and just could tell that it was possibly a wetland. So
Okay.
had the watershed district look at that as well.
Okay, so survey crew usually does that, they determine what wetlands are, or?
Well, they don't classify them or delineate them, but I'm sure they have experience enough to know
Okay.
that this is possibly a wetland.
Their shoes got wet.
There's just-
Yeah, well, everything's a wetland right now, even the middle of the street. Another question for you, does Geranium have a standard 15-foot boulevard?
I'll have to look at that, but most of our Maplewood residential streets, of course, have the 60-foot wide right-of-way and the standard 15-foot boulevard.
Yep. So then, the front building line of this house on the third parcel then would be 36 feet from the curb.
Correct, so certainly the front property line, it's 21 feet to that, and then additional either 10 or 15 in most cases to the actual curb.
Yep. Okay.
That number that they came up with, that 1,600, that you said is because of the amount of area they're grading, is that square for square foot on that, or?
Correct.
So it's not a 2-to-1 like some of the things say that they have to recoup? Because on one of the things here, it says that when they do that, the mitigation has to be a 2-to-1 ratio.
Yeah, the city code on the wetland mitigation does outline some possible strategies, kind of giving some guidance.
Okay. But it's, like you say, it's not a science.
No. Well, it's not a requirement.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure there's science involved somewhere.
Yeah, determining the number, yeah.
What, Bill? Go ahead.
I got another question for you. Right now, we're just looking to consider approving dividing this up into 3 parcels.
Correct.
And then when they get around to building on the third parcel, the one that's got most of the managed sea in it, that will then come to us again?
Oh, excuse me, I misunderstood. Mr. Chair and Commissioner Kempe,
Like, when they come up with blueprints, will that
No.
come forward to us?
no. So, years past, the city may have just approved a lot division, knowing that they'll probably come forward and it will need a variance. I don't know why I said that.
It was a
But-
bundle, it was a bundle deal.
Right. Nowadays, we say, no, we're not going to subdivide this until you get that variance, because we can tell there's probably going to be a variance. So it is a little tricky because they don't have an exact footprint for the building, but in this case, they supplied the building pad and where the likely grading will be. So what you're approving tonight is the variance itself, and so they would not be back.
Now, the clay pipe said it was crushed, so there's no way to relieve the amount of water there. Is that going to be fixed too then, or and who's gonna pay for that, or what's gonna happen with that?
Mr. Chair, I'd prefer to have the applicant speak to that.
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
Did anybody else have any questions for staff? Sure, come on up.
Mr. Chair, Council, we unclogged it and we'll pay for, it will be in my expense. So it was, they found it during the surveying crew found the clogged pipe, or the clay pipe, which.
And
the-
most
the
of it's
manager-
still intact then beyond the edge?
Yeah, if you go over to the site, you can see the water running right off through it now. It's, no water's even holding on the site right now.
What's the deepest the water's ever been there?
I bought it and I never, don't know.
Never seen it real
Purchased the
high?
property, never seen it, never been through a winter.
Okay. Because on your survey, I noticed that it's only like 3'6" above the lowest point for your, bottom of your foundation. And if you've got anything above 4 feet, water there is going to come into the basement. But
Right, we're bringing a lot of fill in here too, so it, but of course not in the back part of it.
Right, right. I'm just looking at your survey because your basement floor height is 98 point something, and then the other one is 80 something, so it's.
Yeah, I can't
a difference
read it.
It's a difference of 3 foot something, I think is what it is. So, that was just my concern that the water, if it didn't get out of there, you could potentially get water in the basement. That's my only concern, so.
Okay.
But you don't see that as ever being.
No, I don't see that being a concern, no.
Okay. Now, I haven't been out to the site. All the water in front of B, there must be storm drains right there.
Yeah, there's actually a storm drain in the back left corner of the property that the city put in. So that's fairly new, but the clogged pipe was in the backside of parcel B.
Okay, and there's also storm drains in front of on the street right there in front of lot B
Yes,
too, right? Yeah.
yes.
Does that go into that doesn't go into anywhere, that goes into the sewer
main,
system? right?
yes, yep.
Okay. And the elevations there are 4 feet above, so I think you're good there too, right? Correct, yep. So. How close are the lots behind that, the houses into that, is that?
I don't know, I don't have that question.
Okay,
But they're large lots. I mean, they're deep, they're big lots.
okay. Anybody else? Okay. Okay, thank you. Will there be any issues with, in the future, now that that's been designated a wetlands with the properties to the rear?
I believe some of those neighbors might be here and could speak to any concerns they might have, but as far as concerns, like if they wanted to build a garage way in the back, they'd have to
Because the wetland,
stay away from they'd have to maintain that buffer.
okay.
But I think the wetland is mostly on this lot, but you're correct, the buffer requirement would encroach into those back lots.
Right, right, and there need to be signage there too, then, I would imagine, sometime.
Well, if they ever proposed something,
You just don't put them up arbitrary then?
no.
Okay. Okay. Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak? So if you come up to the mic then and sign in and state your name and address? No, I don't have a pen. Oh, if you got one? That's all right.
Just talk. My name's Rick Gruffman. I'm here with my wife Linda. We live kitty corner, 2682 Maryland Avenue. So this would be south of me and west. The corner of my property would come right to the corner of this property.
So are you on the Maryland Avenue?
I'm on Maryland Avenue, yes. And my lot, as you can see, the street is quite crooked. So my lot is 100 wide by 201 deep. And I think these lots, you're gonna make 75 wide. They gotta be as deep as mine.
Yeah, I think they're about 150.
Okay, because right behind me is obviously the neighbor Dennis, but I'm fine with building homes there. First of all, neither one of us are against that. I'm mostly here, or we are, just to give you guys and you as a builder a little bit of insight of what I know for living there 20-some years. I know there's an underground creek there, okay? The reason I know this is because off of my garage, I have a crushed rock driveway, a parking area. That was there when I moved in, it's still there. I went to move more rock in there and build it up. And by doing so, I hit a concrete 4-foot, what they think was a cistern. I don't know, my house was only 7 years old when we moved in. The original property had a fire and it burned down. So I don't know much prior to, but I found this thing and I came up to the city and I said, I've got something in my driveway here that I really don't know. It was man-made. It's all nicely formed, just like the wall here with concrete blocks that are formed. And they got a ridge on top to fit in. Anyway, 8 foot deep, 4 foot. So they said, here, just fill it in. We don't show a record. It's not a well, because I know where my well is in the backyard. It is capped. So anyway, I filled it in with Class 5. I bought a Class C motorhome. Now, this had a 4-inch or maybe a 5-inch cement 3-section top on this. So it was like a silo in the ground, if you could picture it. So, okay, so at the time, I bought a motorhome, and of course, I wiggled it there and parked it back there. It was a driveway. I went to move the motorhome one day, and the right front tire kind of dropped. Didn't go all the way in, so I ended up backing the motorhome off there, and my daughter was outside, and she says, what the heck happened? And I said, well, I don't know, I think I must have broke the concrete lid. I figured the Class 5 had sunk, and it broke this lid. Well, this was probably 2.5 years after I filled it. Roughly, wouldn't you say roughly? I took the top off. It was 3 sections. I took the top off. My hole was 8 foot deep. There was no Class 5 in it.
Again?
Gone. Just gone. So I thought, I came up to the city and I told them what I had going on. Again, they just said, we don't show anything in all the blueprints and everything, just fill it in. So I talked to a friend of mine. I actually talked to the previous owner that I bought the house from. He worked for Yoakum Oil right up there by the house. So I happened to run into him at the holiday station when it was the Yoakums. So anyway, I asked him, I said, Dick, I said, there's a man-made cement silo thing in the ground by the driveway. I said, I filled it in and it's all gone. He said, well, I filled it in once while I lived there. So I just I just want you to know, now this is 8 foot down. Now here's what I did. I have a friend of mine who has a construction business. He came over and he went down in there with a ladder. And it's solid, hard ground on the bottom. And my garage was built in 1976, long before I got there. And he took my garden hose and put it down there. And he put about 4 to 5 inches of water in it. In about 35 minutes, all the water was gone. It dissipated or disappeared towards under my garage, which I really don't like, but it's 8 foot down. So what I did is I got a cement mixer, a hand one, and I mixed 4 inches of concrete, and I put concrete in the bottom. And then I put class 5 in, and then I put about 3.5 feet of clay. He brought it to me, clay. And I dropped in vertically the top sections of this concrete, so they are no longer on there. And it's been way over 15 years now, and it hasn't moved. But if it does move, I would know it, because I could see it. So my problem is cured, but there's something underneath there that has pretty good flowage. My neighbor next door, who is directly behind what would be your class, or your lot C, he's directly behind that, next door to me going to the west. They're new neighbors, been there about 4 years maybe. The old guy that used to live there, he's passed away. He grew up in the neighborhood and built 3 homes on that street. And this is the last one he lived in. But anyway, he got really, really, really upset. He literally hated the guy who lived in the house that you're gonna renovate or you cleaned out, the existing home. Because water everybody lives on a hill from east to west. And there's just natural flow. In fact, my driveway right now, I've got little trenches when everything started melting to make sure the water diverted from my house. All I'm trying to say is that the watershed there is a lot. And this guy came, and one of the problems, and I think, how big is this clay pipe? I've never gone over there. The reason I'm asking is because this guy had some pretty good sized tractors. I got 2 Ford tractors at my cabin, and he used to drive and haul compost and just everything down there. And that's why my neighbor used to get so mad, because he said, that's a natural runoff there, and you're plugging it. I guess I have to feel that if you've cleaned that pipe, this is for you. It's not gonna come, I don't believe, and ever flood me. But if you've cleaned that pipe out, I think that'll help considerably. I'm just curious where that pipe goes.
You go right to the beehive system, the sewer system.
Okay. Because there is a natural, not only on top of the ground, you guys, the way the plane is there's underground too. And that water gets in there, and I've never seen it, like he said, I've never seen it like flooding. It does, a lot of water goes in there when we get heavy rains. One year, the end of Ferndale in Maryland, at the end of my block, it was a huge puddle. It was deep. It flooded. And even back there, it didn't, and after a day or two, real hard rain, it's gone. But it's very soft back there. And I think a lot of this is because of the history of this guy dumping everything there. Anyways,
So if you can wrap her up here real quick.
yeah, I just wanted to put 2 cents in, mostly for the builder, that he's aware of, there's a natural flowage down there, not only on top of the ground, I think it's underground. So just, maybe that clay pipe will take care of that. I just wanted to let you guys know that, I think it's great somebody's building over there. That's a good thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You have old septic tanks from the 40s and 50s that was there, and I imagine there's 2 more that are identical to that?
There's no opening in or out.
So, well, a lot of times, when they're put together, the seams, they have like a little relieve holes in them so the water can drain out into the ground. It's a holding tank for the old septic tanks, and like I say, usually there's 2 or 3 more that are,
Well, I have a septic at my cabin. I mean, I know how they work, but this is,
It might be another groundwater.
evidently it was, I mean, this thing is spotless clean inside, like it was just built. It's weird. Anyway, my wife said, I'm not going out by it because you bury me in there. You know?
is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Yes.
Was there anything you'd like to say back there, or you're good? Okay, anybody else? Last call? Seeing none, close the public hearing. How are we ready here?
Good, yeah.
I'm ready.
All right, go ahead, Fred.
Well, I'd like to move that we approve,
Turn your mic on, please. Thank you.
like to move that we approve the variance resolution as stated in attachment 1.
Second?
There's a motion by Fred, second by Alan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing no nays, pass. Now, this is just a recommendation, and this will go before the city council on March 25th. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. You must be the son of the owner, huh?
I am.
Are you ready for all the work, right?
Always am. Love it.
Yeah.
Did a lot in Matanita in that, right, or?
My dad is a developer.
Yeah, yeah.
Careful of the sinkhole.
Okay, we are at new business, number A, resolution of appreciation for John DeFrio Planning Commission. Staff?
I just was curious, I should have asked this before. I understand that the house is, the one for sure has to move closer to the street, correct? Are they gonna both be at least the new homes in line?
Why don't I give you a call tomorrow and we can discuss?
Sure, sure.
All right. If I can have you jot down your phone number, maybe where you, just put your phone number on there?
I just thought it would look better if they're two new homes, make them look even.
Yeah, I'll send you more detailed plans. I did speak to your wife, I believe.
Yeah.
On the phone the other day, yeah.
Sorry, guys, I didn't mean to.
Sure, sure.
Sure. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for coming and for your comments. And I will call you tomorrow to discuss further, and I also touch base with you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks. Might as well make John wait. We always made him wait.
I'd like to
anyhow.
make a motion to approve this and let's go home. I mean,
Okay, I read the resolution for John. Did you want to go further on that?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Can we hear the pros and cons on that?
when is the party?
For John?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to be
Because
there.
John left.
He doesn't have to be there. We can still have a party.
Kidding, John. Sorry, I lost track. We had a crazy crowd there, didn't we?
Yeah, they're out of control.
All right, here we are. So our next item is resolution of appreciation for John Donofrio. So, when a citizen member ends their time of service on a board or commission, the city considers adoption of a resolution of appreciation recognizing the individual for their time committed to serving Maplewood. So in this case, John Donofrio recently resigned as a member of the Maplewood Planning Commission, and it should be noted that he was appointed on February 11th of 2013 and did serve until November of 2018. So we have a resolution here before you, and this will be reviewed by your commission and then go on to the city council on March 25th. So with that,
I'll
looking
make
for a
motion-
recommendation.
I'll make a motion, we approve it.
I have a question. Do you, I'm just wondering, When somebody is resigning, does it have to come before the planning commission whether to accept or reject the resignation?
Because you're afraid that when you're done, we're
Yeah,
going to
we
reject
know,
it?
We won't let you,
Better not ever quit.
or we might say, please.
I'm just wondering so that you guys don't say no, or just get out.
Right, right. Don't let that door hit you on the way out.
We usually are appreciative of everyone's efforts regardless of who it is. No.
When it's my retirement time, I want to have the day of Paul Arbuckle, though, on the,
Well,
the
we
governor
know that
I think they are for that because they,
Yeah.
city of Maplewood.
you're all volunteers, and we, without the volunteers here, really the city council, you're doing all the hard legwork and the review and research and giving those good recommendations to the council. So we're very dependent on your expertise. So we really, really, really do appreciate. And when it is your time to resign or maybe get kicked off the plant, no, I'm just kidding. We certainly would recognize you as well.
And we like it. All in favor?
we have to have a second.
Second.
Second by Bill.
I'm assuming there was a motion there somewhere.
I did, I made the motion.
Okay, good.
Paul made the motion. Bill by second. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Hearing no nays, passed.
Okay, John.
Any unfinished business? No visitor presentations, commissioner presentations.
Yeah, get
January
this started.
28th, City Council, Commissioner Deshar. Conditional use permit resolutions, auto sales at 1955 County Road D. Deshar.
Yes, I did not go to the meeting because it was decided that they were gonna put it as part of the big package of approvals without any discussions on them.
Yeah.
So there was no reason for me to be there.
So then that passed then?
Yes, it did.
Okay. So you get that information before it's been, okay.
Yeah, it did pass.
It passed, okay. And then on March 25th, City Council meeting, Commissioner Bill Kempe, wetland buffer and the wetland buffer. You gonna be able to do that?
Will those,
Unfortunately, no, I'm not available that day.
so will those be on the consent agenda?
No.
Probably not.
No? Okay.
You can still go though, Fred.
No, it's okay. I won't be here.
We'll be down
That
here.
may-
so
Would you like to attend the city council meeting on that evening, March 25th, to represent Planning Commission?
Sure.
I'll just ask you a few
Perfect.
questions.
Okay.
It's not tough.
Yep. He is good
I don't
for
know
it.
if I need, want to
Thank
believe
you.
You, no, when you
thought we
need,
were gonna
the
draft
Bill,
Alan.
then Bill, you'll have to, Bill will do one for you then too when it comes.
I thought we were supposed to draft Alan.
Switch them.
Alan, because he wanted to do
Aren't we
it?
supposed to
Yeah.
give all of them to Alan?
Yes, he loves to do those.
Yeah, I know.
I
No,
can
just-
see you
just
through that.
remember,
I can see you through that.
I've been subbing for a lot of other people.
Yes, I definitely agree.
You love going though.
I would do it if I was here.
Yeah.
I'm not in town.
Who wasn't here last time that we had to cancel the meeting? Who was that, fault
It
was
was
that?
Bill.
Was it Bill? You were out of town too?
I was
then?
here.
No? I know Deshar was here, because, and I was
I
here,
was here for CDRB.
so was
And then-
Alan then.
Yeah.
I like, I know exactly where you were going, huh?
I just wanted to know why the meeting was canceled. I was just questioning who wasn't here.
Had to have been Alan.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have a forum, so.
I didn't-
Any staff presentations?
Are you gentlemen finished there?
Yeah.
No, but I think we should recognize your newest member here, Lou Yang, who was appointed last week and has agreed to come to his first meeting right away, so, and I see you're already picking on him, making him go to the council meeting. It's a good way to,
Baptism by fire.
jump in.
Yeah,
Yep.
deep into the
so
pond.
welcome, Mr. Yang.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah. Good to have you.
That's it for me, thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Look at that.
Thank you.
5 minutes.
What was,
to the
where